What's up, 49ers faithful? The game against the Jaguars left us with plenty to break down, and the more I went back and rewatched the film, the more complicated my feelings got about how San Francisco performed. Right after the game, I was trying to stay balanced, but looking back now, with all the replays and highlights fresh in my mind, I got to admit that my confidence in Brock Purdy's play dropped quite a bit. When I saw it live, it felt like he was battling and still keeping the offense afloat. But on the second look, there were just too many misfires. Some throws sailed high, others died short, some drifted way left or too far right, and you could see how off rhythm the passing game looked. I know the toe injury he's dealing with probably played a bigger role than it seemed at first, and that's something you just cannot ignore when judging his performance. Still, as much as I don't want to dump all the turnovers directly on him, it's impossible not to give him more of the blame now than I did in the heat of the moment. But even with all of that negativity, there are reasons to be encouraged. The Niners, somehow, still managed to put together a handful of explosive plays. Despite all the turnovers and all the missed opportunities, San Francisco's offense still outscored Jacksonville's attack and moved the ball more effectively. That's not nothing. That shows resilience, and it shows how tough this team is to put away. Think about it. They coughed up the ball 4 times, essentially handed extra chances to the opponent, and even then the Jaguars had a grind to secure the win. That's the definition of a hard team to beat. If the 49ers clean up even half of those mistakes, they probably win that game going away. And to me, that's a hopeful sign. Now, beyond what happened on the field, the NFL just gave San Francisco a pretty huge favor. The schedule this season hasn't exactly been kind, especially with those early kickoffs. To start the year, the Niners had to play 5 different games at 10 in the morning West Coast time, none of them at Levi's Stadium. All of them were either on the East Coast or smack in the middle of the country. New Orleans, Tampa, Houston, New York, Cleveland. Anyone who follows football closely knows that those early starts are brutal for West Coast teams. Your body clock isn't aligned, your routine gets thrown off, and statistically, those games have been landmines for teams traveling across time zones. But here's the good news. The league decided to flex San Francisco's upcoming matchup into the later national window. Instead of kicking off at what feels like dawn for the players, they'll get that 1:25 slot, which is much closer to a normal rhythm. People might shrug and say it's just a couple of hours, but for athletes, it makes a huge difference. Look no further than what happened to the Chargers. They flew east to face the Giants, a team led by a rookie quarterback and missing key playmakers, and still came up flat. They looked sluggish, they couldn't put points on the board, and they walked away with a loss they had no business taking. Was it all about the time zone? Probably not, but it sure didn't help. West Coast squads just don't perform well in those early East Coast starts, and now the 49ers won't have to deal with that disadvantage. Call it a gift, call it a stroke of luck, either way, it is an edge that San Francisco should gladly take. Of course, this doesn't erase the concerns. Injuries continue to pile up, and the updates from Kyle Shanahan were a mixed bag. Malik Mustafa, who has been rehabbing the ACL tear from late last season, is finally trending toward returning to practice after Week 6. That is excellent news because the defense desperately needs reinforcements. On the other hand, Ricky Parrall suffered what looks like a minor PCL issue, the kind of thing we saw Christian McCaffrey manage through last year. It might not be season-ending, but it's still a blow, especially given how important he's become to this offense. Watching his body language after he tried to come back in for a snap told me everything. I'll be shocked if he suits up on Thursday. Then there's Jawan Jennings, who swore he'd be fine after taking a big shot to the ribs, but woke up the next morning sore and uncertain. If he can't go, the wide receiver room is suddenly paper thin, especially with Marquez Valdes-Scantling not dressing last week. Kinder Bourne has been inconsistent. Sky Moore still hasn't carved out a reliable role, and Brock Purdy needs as many weapons as possible if he's going to bounce back. Speaking of Purdy, Shanahan mentioned that he complained about toe soreness again, which makes me doubt he'll be available on such a short turnaround. That complicates things massively. A backup quarterback stepping into a Thursday night divisional battle isn't exactly ideal. The 49ers can run the ball, and they can rely on their defense, but if Purdy sits, it changes the entire equation. That toe is becoming a bigger storyline than anyone wanted, and the longer it lingers, the more nervous fans have to feel about the season. And while we're on the defense, let's not sugarcoat it. The line's performance without Nick Bosa was one of the worst we've seen in a decade. Just 5 total pressures across the entire game. That's unacceptable. If you can't stop the run, and you also can't collapse the pocket, you're not giving yourself any chance to dominate. The Jaguars had a long ATN run that padded the stats, but even removing that, the 49ers were out of sync. The energy, the push, the disruption we've come to expect from this front just wasn't there. When your best player is missing, the rest of the group has to step up, but instead, they got swallowed up. That's a real concern moving forward, because San Francisco's entire defensive identity is built around the line, creating chaos. Without it, the secondary gets exposed, linebackers are left in space too often, and the whole structure starts to wobble. Still, there were standout efforts. Fred Warner once again looked like the heartbeat of the team, and the advanced grades backed it up. According to Pro Football Focus, he was not only the highest-rated player in that game, but currently sits as the top-graded player in the entire league. That's how dominant he's been. He hasn't had the interception numbers people love to see yet, but the forced fumbles, the near picks, the constant presence around the ball, those things matter, and they show up on film every single week. He's playing at a Defensive Player of the Year level, and it feels inevitable that the turnovers will come. On the offensive line, there's good news and bad news. Colton McKivitz, believe it or not, is rated as the best pass-blocking right tackle in football. Just 6 pressures allowed through 4 games, which is a huge win considering how shaky the line looked coming into the season. Locking him up early on a contract extension looks like one of the smarter front office moves in recent memory. Meanwhile, Trent Williams is showing signs that time is finally catching up with him. He's still graded as the 5th best tackle in the NFL, which tells you how high his baseline remains. But the eye test makes it clear he isn't present snap after snap. Fans might not like hearing that, but it's reality. Every legend eventually hits that stage where the mind still knows exactly what to do, but the body can't always execute. It's a tough pill to swallow, but that's football. And next to him, things get uglier. Rookie Connor Kebby has been thrown into the fire, and while he flashed some promise earlier, the last 2 outings have been rough. 5 pressures surrendered in back-to-back games is not sustainable. And if the groin injury he's been managing is limiting him, that's another problem to monitor. As a unit, the offensive line gave up 16 total pressures compared to just 5 for Jacksonville. That disparity tells you almost everything you need to know about how the trenches were lost. So the story of this game is really a tale of contradictions. You had an offense that, even while turning it over 4 times, still produced more yards and more scoring plays than its opponent. You had a defense that looked lifeless up front, yet still had a linebacker putting together a masterpiece. You had an offensive line with 1 tackle grading out as the best in the NFL and another rookie guard looking completely overwhelmed. It's that push and pull that makes it so hard to figure out exactly what the ceiling is for this team right now. Digging deeper into the numbers tells an even more complicated story about where this 49ers team stands right now. When you look at the advanced stats, especially the breakdown from Pro Football Focus, you start to realize how uneven the performances have been across the board. Take the secondary, for example. Early in the game, it looked like Darrell Luter Jr. was going to be a primary target for Trevor Lawrence. But surprisingly, he was tested only twice and gave up a total of just 11 yards. That's a solid showing for a young corner thrown into the spotlight. Upton Stout also held up reasonably well, allowing 8 yards on a couple of passes in his direction. The surprise came from Diamador Lenore, who was expected to be steadier, but ended up giving up the most yardage among the corners. That inconsistency across the defensive backfield mirrors what we saw in the pass rush. Some players doing their job admirably, others faltering, and the overall unit struggling to find balance. On the offensive side, the same mixed bag exists. McKivitz, as mentioned earlier, is establishing himself as one of the best right tackles in the game, while Trent Williams remains elite, even if not at his absolute peak. But when you add up the individual breakdowns, you see the cracks. Williams allowed 4 pressures, Dominic Punny gave up 2, McKivitz 2, and Jake Brindle 1. That's 16 pressures allowed in one afternoon. Far too many for an offense that wants to control games with efficiency and balance. Jacksonville, on the other hand, surrendered only 5 pressures total. You can argue that the Jaguars' defensive front isn't stacked with household names, but they played disciplined football and took advantage of San Francisco's weaknesses. That gap between 16 and 5 is massive, and it played out on the field with Purdy never looking comfortable in the pocket. Now let's go back to Purdy himself. Watching the game live, you might have felt he was making gutsy throws, keeping the offense alive even when things broke down. But on replay, the inconsistency becomes glaring. Balls sailing high, others dying in the dirt, timing completely off on certain routes. Some fans will point out that Purdy's style sometimes relies on those higher throws to give big targets like George Kittle a chance to go up and make a play, and there's truth to that. We've all seen Kittle or Brandon Ayuk or even Demarcus Robinson snag a ball in traffic that only exists because Purdy trusted them to elevate. But there's a fine line between calculated risk and sloppy execution. And in this game, that line was crossed too often. The turnovers are the obvious red flags. And while not every single one was squarely his fault, the quarterback always shoulders a portion of the responsibility when the ball ends up in enemy hands. Add in the lingering toe soreness that Shanahan confirmed, and suddenly the picture gets even murkier. A compromised quarterback on a short week is rarely a recipe for success, and that raises serious questions about how the offense will function if he cannot go. The broader issue is what this performance reveals about San Francisco's identity right now. At their best, the 49ers are a team that dominates in the trenches, plays suffocating defense, and hits explosive plays on offense by spreading the ball to their array of playmakers. Against Jacksonville, none of that formula looked reliable. The line crumbled, the defense failed to get pressure, and the skill players were banged up to the point where Shanahan was patching together drives with whoever was healthy enough to line up. It is still remarkable that even with 4 turnovers, the Niners were right there, moving the ball better than the Jaguars and proving again that the overall talent level is high enough to survive sloppy execution. But relying on resilience alone is a dangerous game, and if the trend continues, it could become a long season. That's why the scheduling change from the NFL feels so important. In the grand scheme, flexing a game by a couple of hours might seem minor, but for a team fighting through injuries and struggling with rhythm, every advantage matters. You don't want to play exhausted. You don't want to wake up at what feels like 6 in the morning to kick off against an East Coast opponent, and you don't want to compound the challenge of short rest with body clock disadvantages. This adjustment gives San Francisco a little more breathing room, a little more normalcy, and maybe just enough of an edge to put together a cleaner performance. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to 49ers Zone and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the San Francisco 49ers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. The NFL rumor mill is buzzing like never before after whispers emerged that AMON St. Brown has landed with the San Francisco 49ers, a move that could instantly reshape their aerial attack. While official confirmations remain scarce, sources close to the organization suggest that St. Brown, known for his precise route running and sure hands, has already begun integrating with the team's offense. The timing couldn't be more intriguing, as the 49ers' passing game has been a point of scrutiny, and adding a receiver of St. Brown's caliber could tilt the balance of power in the NFC. Fans on social media are already speculating how quarterback Brock Purdy might exploit this potential connection. Imagine the possibilities: quick slants, crossing routes that stretch the field, and that signature ability St. Brown has to find the soft spots in any coverage. Analysts point out that pairing him with the existing core could open up entire new dimensions in the 49ers offense. With tight ends George Kittle and other key targets already commanding attention, defenses might be forced into impossible choices, and St. Brown could be the beneficiary of that chaos. Inside sources hint that the coaching staff is thrilled, seeing St. Brown not only as a reliable chain mover, but as a player who can turn critical third downs into momentum-shifting plays. He's a game changer, one anonymous team insider reportedly said. When he's on the field, defenses have to account for him on every snap. Meanwhile, the locker room buzzes with anticipation as teammates are reportedly eager to throw the ball to a receiver who consistently proves he can make the contested catches and come down with the ball in clutch moments. While the league waits for an official statement, the mere prospect of St. Brown suiting up in the Bay Area has already ignited conversations in fantasy leagues, sports podcasts, and local bars alike. Could this be the move that propels the 49ers to another championship run? Or is it just another tantalizing rumor destined to fade before the first snap? One thing is certain. If this deal comes through, AMON St. Brown might just become the secret weapon that catapults San Francisco's passing game into a whole new stratosphere. The NFL offseason just got a lot more interesting. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the San Francisco 49ers, make sure to subscribe to 49ers Zone and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.